Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Rise Urban Nation. It's your host, Terrell Simmons, and I got a special guest in the building. I want to say me and her go back like beans and pacifiers, but I just feel like we go back that far because we have a mutual acquaintance that we both dearly admire. Like the one, the only, the amazing Roxanne. Like I knew Roxanne when she was in Rise San Diego, and she's actually my coaching circle coach. I don't know if I ever told you that. But how did you meet Roxanne? If you want to recap for the folks who don't know, how did you meet Roxanne?
Yeah. So in my past life as an executive director, which I never wanted to be, but I know we'll get into that in this conversation. Um, in my past life as an executive director, a nonprofit executive director, I had a moment when I was looking for someone to facilitate a racial equity conversation for my board of advisors.
Hmm.
And I love those conversations. They're literally my favorite, but I knew that I, as the ED, needed to be involved and be a participant in that conversation.
Hmm.
Asked my team to do some research, someone who would be ideal to come in and have this really real and honest conversation with my team. My team pulled a couple names. Roxanne's name was one.
There.
And of course, this won't surprise you. As soon as you learn anything about Roxanne, you know that you need to have her in the building. And so that's how it came to pass. She facilitated this training for my board members who still talk about today how transformative and how incredible it was for them.
Yes, Roxanne is definitely transformative is the best word to use. Roxanne, she's a force of
Agreed.
nature too. So,
Yes.
if you ain't ready to have a real one and get us some dialogue, you do not want Roxanne
Don't
in that
talk to
room
her.
with you.
Don't talk to her, which
If
I
if
appreciate.
you're
I
not ready to
appreciate
do
it.
some soul searching, Roxanne is not for you.
Don't talk to her. She ain't the one. And I love it. I love it.
Wait, so for those who not getting the visual experience, she got this lovely flower behind her, and what's your board say? I can't. What does it say?
So this is my one of my family members' boards. It says chance favors the prepared.
Ooh, okay, I like that. All right, break that down. What does that mean to you?
You know what's funny? I love that you asked about it. I see it every day because I'm in here every day, but I
Uh
never thought about it, what it means to me. And I think that, yeah, thank you for directing me to it. I think for me, what it means is our blessings can find us if we do our work,
hmm.
right? So, like, and for me, when I think about our work, I think so much about what we are called to do, whatever we believe in, right? For me, it's God guiding me, but whatever one believes in, what we are called to do is our work in the world.
Mm,
The blessings that we need and the favor that we need to be able to walk that path can find us if we do our part.
mm-hmm.
And we have to be listening, I think, pretty intently a lot of times to understand what is my unique part. I have this, ongoing battle with God where he's like, can you stop trying to do my job? Do yours. I got you. I got the other part. Do your job. And so actually in that context, it means to me like all the things will find you,
Yeah.
but do your job and be ready on your job and I will take care of the rest.
Yeah. What my auntie used to say. You want to make God laugh. Tell him your plans.
Always. And he be cracking up laughing at me like, girl, I've been told you that's not how we roll.
Yeah.
But some of us are hard headed. It's our life, it's our plight.
I'm glad that you share that, and you like do a perfect segue for kind of like this discussion we having today. Like
Hmm.
the whole reason I started this podcast was to, there's so many of us that have not found their path or stubborn to not
Mm,
submit to the and to do the work and prepare
mm.
ourselves for what the journey has in store for us, and we need
Yes.
help along the way. And I like I've even seen the funny part about this is I used to go talk in high schools and so forth, and
Hmm.
so many students like there's a black man leading like an organization in HR and DI. Like, oh, I can't be
Mm,
right. Like, you the only one, right?
mm.
And these youth used to have the kids that look like us had so many limiting beliefs And when COVID
Yes.
happened, I was like, all right, I wanted some way to, tell our stories. So, we can inspire
Mm,
others. And then, as I moved away from the youth and started working with more adults, I realized, man, adults even have limited beliefs on who we are, what we could
man, do they
be,
ever?
and
Yes.
finding our truths and our,
Yes.
our story. So I'm hoping that we just have an organic conversation about your, you getting out your own way. So find a way.
Listen, how long is this interview? We gonna be at it. I could write 17 books.
Oh
Oh yeah.
man! Now, I mean, you talked about so let's go back a little bit because you said you were once an
Yes.
executive director. So let's go
Yes.
back in that journey. Like, you
Hmm.
know, you said you shouldn't have been. So, tell me, like, let's see, where do you want to start at in that story? Because I feel like where can we start in that story? So, there had to be
Yeah.
something that led you to the aha moment. Like, you know what, this maybe this ain't for me, and some soul searching. So, tell me, what was that like? Like, how did you even get to that
Mm.
place of that moment of like,
Oh
all right,
man. Whew. Yeah. So I mean, not only was I once an executive director, I was twice an executive
oh,
director
so you
to be
doubled
very
down on it.
accurate. Yo, as I said, I did not choose it. I did not want to be there, and I said that out loud many times. So to your point, calling back, when you tell God what you're gonna do, He's like, "You don't tell me
Yeah,
what you gonna do. I tell you."
yeah.
And this is very much an illustration of that. So I think maybe I'll start at the beginning of like my big girl career.
Okay.
So I started my career as a teaching fellow with a nonprofit in East Oakland. Um, and I loved that job. It was
Hmm.
the hardest job I ever did in my life. I think before being an entrepreneur, it's the second hardest job I've ever done in my life.
Yeah,
Um, but I loved it every day.
yeah.
I loved being able to work with middle school students. I loved learning from them. It's such an important time where it's very easy, I think, to look at that age group and be like, they don't know what's going on. They don't know
Hmm.
if they're up or down. They don't know what's going on. And the reality is, maybe,
Hmm.
but they also have this beautiful wisdom because they're asking a lot of questions about themselves, about others, about the world. And so that's where my career began. And I really had a vision that I was going to be a teacher or I was going to be a principal, and that's how I was going to be able to, give back in the world and how I was going to be able to do my work in the world. From there, I went on, so I was a teaching fellow. I then became an administrator at the same school. And so was coaching teachers, supporting in a different way. And then I moved into a nonprofit like program directing space.
Hmm.
I also loved that. That was a really powerful experience to have. I was doing work with a health equity organization, managing a team,
Hmm.
managing people who were managers. And that was a particular experience to be having too. um, and started to just move up, my trajectory within nonprofit leadership. And so I moved very quickly from being a program director right into an executive director role at another organization.
Hmm.
I would not recommend that. For anybody who's listening, I wouldn't recommend it. But you can do it, right? I'm a testament to that it can be done. And one of the things that I have to always say is that I have been so blessed to have people in my life who were like, Rachel, you cannot stay here. Like you need to level up. It's time to level up.
Hmm.
And if I hadn't had those people in my life, I would have been probably still in the space where I started in, which would not have been a problem, except I would not have had all these other experiences and I would not have, I think, been able to see other ways in which I could impact society, impact the world,
Yeah.
impact other people. And so that move was a very important one where my manager at the time was like, I know you're comfortable in this program director seat. I know you're feeling yourself because you feel like you're doing big things, and that's fine. I think it's time though for you to elevate. I think
Hmm.
it's time for you to become an executive director. 2 weeks after he told me that, someone reached out to me from an organization with an executive director position.
Hmm.
And it had never been a conversation before that. And so did that for a couple years, took on a different fundraising related role at another organization, and then really ended my nonprofit career in a second executive director role and did that for a couple years as well.
Hmm.
Um, but there was it was a trajectory that I would have never chosen, that I would have never expected, I would have never written out, this is the way that I want to arrive at this place.
Yeah.
I just feel like I was moved place to place to place to place. And now today I'm very clear as to why I sat in every one of those seats. But I wouldn't have chosen it. It had to happen to me almost.
Yeah. It had, like we said earlier, it kind of chose you in that natural progression. Now, those people who
Hmm.
kind of helped you along the way, would you consider them like
Yeah,
mentors, or are
for
these just
sure.
individuals that saw something more in you that
Mm.
you probably didn't see in yourself at the time?
Yeah, both and more,
Uh,
right? I think they're people who are my mentors, but today they're folks who are just my friends.
yeah.
Um, I think of them quite honestly as people who are, whether they knew it or not, I think have been appointed to be my angels in some capacity, who were
Oh.
just like, girl, you got work to do in this world. Like you can't stay here. You gotta keep moving. Like you cannot stay here. Um, and I always had those people, even from, when I was working at Parks and Recreation, which was my literal first job before I got to the career place. I always had people who were like, nope, keep going. Time to elevate.
The,
Nope, you can't stay here.
the,
Time to elevate.
wait, your first job was in Parks and Rec? You had a good first job. Like
Yeah,
most people
I
got
sure
Mickey
did.
D's and like
Oh, they would have sent me home. They would have sent me home. The first time I got something under my nails, I would have made everybody's life hard, and they would have been like, "Get out of here, dude! Like you're not the one."
Wait, so tell me the story. How did you get Parks and Rec as your first job and then transition on to uh what was the job after that? I'm assuming in the nonprofit space, right?
So yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that was the teaching fellow job. So Parks and Rec, I had that job when I was 16.
Yeah.
Um, and actually, that wasn't even my first job. My very first job, and I will tell you about Parks and Rec, but let me be accurate.
Okay.
My very first job, I worked as a member of the fashion board. It was 15 and a half at not at Nordstrom, and
What?
they had like, yeah, it was so strange. I mean, I only halfway remember it to be honest, because it was a long, long time ago. It
Uh,
was almost 20 years ago, but we would do stuff like when they had, promotion for new clothes,
uh-huh.
we would, put the displays together, we would dress the mannequins, and like we were so excited about that. That was so important to us. But I was 15 and a half. I worked at Nordstrom technically as my first job,
Uh-huh.
but my first like job where I had a regular schedule,
Mhm.
it happened all year, was Parks and Rec.
Yeah. I could see.
And so the answer to your question, I got that job because I volunteered. I think from the time I was 13, I was a volunteer. And so when it came time to apply, I had all this volunteer experience with the city that I could then say, please hire me as a recreation leader.
Gotcha, gotcha. I can see the a little bit of the fashion essence for those who are just getting the audio experience. My girl came with the leather jacket. She got the earrings, got the statement piece. The hair is on fleek. Like she got that
Listen.
style, that swag with her.
My friend, I appreciate you. I was not gonna come in here and not stunt. Like I was not gonna come in here and not, bring my best. These are my favorite earrings from Barcelona
Uh-huh.
that I got in some, vintage shop. So this is the good good,
Okay, all right. It's like
and I'm glad you
you
appreciate it.
almost made me go back and change my outfit. I was like,
You look great.
I'm on my casual tip. She the one that like
You
looking
look
like she
great.
hit Def Comedy Jam or something like special.
Listen, you don't know where things end up. You got to make sure you come with it.
Yeah, but I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Um, so I always love hearing about people's journey about where they started because I always
Hmm.
tell people like, look, it's not where you start, it's how you finish, right? And because life,
Yeah,
just like
yeah.
anything in life, is a journey, and
Hmm.
I'm in love with the journey because it's progression, it's growth, it's lessons, it's ups, it's downs, it's
Hmm.
mistakes. I love all of it because it prepares you for the next chapter, which I've seen
Yes,
just
it
from
does.
this short conversation how the next thing has prepared you for the next thing to the next thing to the next thing,
Yes,
and you may not know it
yes.
in the moment, but um it reveals itself much later on,
Hmm.
which
Every
brings me
time.
to where you're at now. Like,
Yeah.
um all these different experiences seems like it's kind of prepared you for what you do today. And tell the people what
Yeah.
you do today and how these experiences has
Mhm.
kind of shaped, the business and the entity that you're creating.
Yeah. Thank you for the space to do so. So, yes, 100%. That is the truth. Every single step has prepared me for this moment. And sometimes I would say it actually almost brings tears to my eyes to think about like the intention that my life has been, right? And it's not me taking credit. I'm an intentional person,
Yeah.
but the intention that it took for me to get from this place to this place and how many people, truly how many people stewarded me along that journey, step by step by step.
Hmm.
So today, I'm the founder of Culture Kinesis, and Culture Kinesis is focused on essentially creating containers in which we can have cultural reimagination conversations,
Mm.
so supporting people to be able to really engage at a level of depth
Hmm.
around what is culture
Yeah.
and what types of cultures do we imagine as different from the ones that exist currently,
Yeah.
specifically around racial equity. And so I like to say a lot of times I feel so called to do this work, but it has been literally decades in the making. And again, I can make those connections like that stewarding and that
Hmm.
learning and that piece by piece by piece, taking from different roles and taking from different experiences and arriving here.
Hmm.
I like to say that culture kinesis's work is really the work that I want people to do before they hire their first DEI consultant or before they, start convening a DEI committee.
Hmm.
um, the work of like, let's name what we have here. Let's name what we need to unlearn and
Hmm.
what we need to learn. Let's name who's here. Let's build community in a very intentional way.
Yeah.
And let's dream together so that we're not just trying to build things on top of what already exists. Because a lot of times, if we dig into the history of what already exists, we start to realize there's a lot here that we probably shouldn't take into the next
Mm.
iteration.
Speak
And so,
on
how do we do that work? Right?
it.
How do we do that work? And I mean, we're not educated in that way in this country often, right? We are not taught to look underneath the hood or look behind the curtain and see what are the bones of this operation. And that's the work that I love to do. I love to have a difficult conversation. I love to help
Hmm.
people understand the power that they have to shift things, but also hold people lovingly accountable to. You may not just shift to a conversation about how you retain Black people in an organization.
Yeah.
There's so many more conversations that you must have before you get there.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. Um, you know, in a perfect world, I would love everybody to do the pre work, but I, I just don't know how to get everybody to do the pre work because sometimes people are like, I remember sometimes in certain government spaces I walk in, people are, whatever the foundation is there, they're so ingrained to that
Mhm.
foundation and culture they can't let it
Oh,
go.
yeah.
Like even though you
Yeah.
try to educate them on, well, this is not inclusive. This system is inherently racist. Da, da, da. No, we've
Yeah.
been doing it this way for 15, 25, 35, 40 years, right? We've
And
always
it
done
ain't
it this
working.
way.
So why are we
And,
doing it
and,
this way?
and
Right.
this new guy ain't gonna come in here and tell us how to do something that he don't know nothing about.
This part. Exactly. Every time. Every time. Even people who genuinely want things to be different, right? Like that's the part that's most intriguing to me. A lot of times it's the people. I think I want to do the work of having breakthroughs with people who
Mhm.
really want to do the work,
Right.
but don't understand in a lot of ways. In order for us to upend the status quo, in order for us to unseat these things that have been entrenched for centuries, this level of oppression,
Mhm.
we have to be very creative.
Mhm.
And capitalism does not teach us creativity.
Mhm.
And so I think that part of us that is inherently artist, that is inherently creative, has been so far removed from our everyday lives
Mhm.
that we can't envision something different a lot of times
Mhm.
because that part of us, we've forgotten how to dream and we've forgotten how to be creative. And so that's also a big part of the work. I'm an artist too,
Yeah.
stewarding people through how do you awaken that artist self in a way that allows you to reimagine a future that is so much better than what you've ever seen.
Mm.
in a different way. We can't bring the same tools and hope to have a vastly different outcome.
Man, and then you said that so beautifully, and I could tell you're an artist just by the flow of the dialogue and just the dress code. Now,
Dress code.
like when you were saying this, I was thinking, I was like, man, how did somebody like herself, her personality, being an artist, being so multifaceted, talented, and just like, how did she navigate being in these different roles in the nonprofits? I guess it's probably why you're an entrepreneur now. But
Ooh,
how do you create in spaces like that, or how do you get people to start to
yeah.
imagine differently and create in spaces that don't allow for
Mhm.
that? What's the
Yeah.
key to that?
Yeah. It's such a beautiful and powerful, and also thank you for all the things that you said in the beginning of your question. I appreciate them, and they're sitting in my heart. Thank you. It's different for every person, right? So I work with, ultimately, what I tell folks a lot is my work is about individuals, whether it's individuals in community,
Mm,
in an organization, or whether it's individuals in a one-to-one coaching space. But either way, it's a process of co-creation, right? So
mm,
it looks different every time. And I'm always really clear with people, like, I don't have any answers for you from jump, right? I don't have them. I don't. We're going to figure this out together. But what I do know is I know the questions I need to ask you to
uh,
get you from this place to the place where you very willingly break open
ooh,
so that people can see your other layers, right? Like
uh,
that to me is that. And that piece I learned from being an artist.
uh,
I know, I can see it in my mind's eye. Like I know I can envision that moment when I'm on stage
uh,
and I'm singing, and the moment when people are like, okay, I'm vibing with this, but I'm not in it. Like I'm not connected to it. And I also know the moment when people are connected on an emotional level because they sense some vulnerability happening, they sense something else
mhm,
moving, they sense a deeper humanity at
mhm,
play. And then people, they meet you there, right? So to answer your question very directly, some of the techniques and tactics that I use are I bring music into the space, right? So
mhm,
my one-on-one coaching clients will tell you that we'll sing together sometimes, or they'll say like, Rachel, I'm having a hard time with this piece. I need you to give me something. And I have to meet them at that place of vulnerability. And sometimes I have to go first and offer that part of myself, so that they feel like they can meet me there. A lot of it also is storytelling.
mhm,
Like I often do an activity with folks that I call a room full of strangers, where I take people who know each other
mhm,
and say, okay, you think you know each other. Let's get a little deeper though, because I guarantee you don't know each other in the way that you think you do. And you don't know the things about people that help you see their humanity. You might
mm,
know their religion, right? You might know their family, you might know a lot of things about them, but you don't know the things that people don't readily say in
yeah,
workspaces. Those things are the things that matter. That's when we start to see each other. And when we start to see each other, we start to do a whole different type of work.
mm, yeah. That's so true, and I love the way you do that by storytelling, story sharing, because really having that level of connection and then peeling back the layers to get to the vulnerability is really
Mhm.
what starts to break down those walls and allow for spaces of co-creation and to see each
Yeah.
other's humanity right where it lives. So I love the work that you're doing and love the way you broke it down
Thank you, my friend.
for us.
Thank you.
Now, it's funny. Like I just did an interview with a good friend of mine, Eric Morrison Smith. I think it was last week, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And he started this thing called borrow knowledge, and it's
Hmm.
co-creating spaces in community, where he borrowed and the reason why it's called borrow knowledge because he's borrowing from our past, like Ella Baker,
Hmm.
W.E. Du Bois, and some of the teachings and foundations of people from the civil rights movement that weren't in the front lines of how they co-created spaces.
Hmm. Hmm.
And he's using that same reference point to co-create spaces in community, and
Yeah,
everything that you're talking about he was referencing too. So I was like, man, is this a
I
coincidence
love
that
that.
my back-to-back interviews are around the same alignment of topic and so forth?
I love that. I need to look that up. I love
Yeah,
it.
borrowed knowledge. Definitely check it out. After the podcast, I'll send you a link to it. Now,
Please do.
um, I know you're going to inspire somebody in this podcast, and I want to try to give them what you think would be kind of like technical steps to where you got today. If you had to,
Mm,
put it in context for somebody who's on their path, their journey, trying to do
mm,
something similar, get into their space of creation, to do the thing that they do, and and whether it's leaving their 9 to 5 or starting their own business, what would you say were some of
yeah.
the important steps that you took to, really start on your journey and build your career where it is today, as far as entrepreneurship, the coaching,
Mm,
and all that stuff? What was some steps you think were vital to get you to where you're at? That doesn't mean they have to mimic it, but like that
mm-hmm.
you would say as advice, like, here's some reference points that were good for me. Take what you can, throw out the rest, but these were the steps.
Mm. So there's a quotation that I hold in my mind a lot of times. It's by T.S. Eliot, and this is not verbatim, but basically he says, we start at a place, we have all these experiences and all these journeys, and we come back to exactly the place that we started in, but different.
Mm-hmm.
And I offer that because sometimes it can be hard to say, very technically, this is how I got from point A to point B. And I would be asked that question a lot, especially when I sat in an executive director seat, because in nonprofit, for a lot of people, that's the goal, right? To
Mm-hmm.
end up in that space, to be the leader of an organization. And I understand that. I understand why people have that vision. I think what I would say, if I'm speaking from that perspective,
Mm-hmm.
if somebody wants to be a nonprofit leader, I think that what I would recommend is start with community.
Mm-hmm.
Like, take a position where you can be as close as is humanly possible
Mm-hmm.
to community, because that will shape your entire experience throughout your trajectory. I know a lot of people in a lot of seats, a lot of spaces who are my peers in work who had gotten there a different way, but did not have the same connection to community that I did. And it was apparent in their choices, it was apparent in the way they spoke about the work, their connection to the work. So I would say first start in a role that really connects you to community, so that you know you love community
Mm-hmm.
and you take that with you through each step.
Mm-hmm. I love it.
I think I can answer it also, and go ahead, I'm
No, no,
sorry.
no, no. I said I love that. So go ahead. I know you
Oh.
got the other version to it. Go ahead. Give me the other version. Give me the artistic and the lover. Go ahead.
So it's funny because I see it in my mind as like there's a starting point and there's all these different paths, right, that happened kind of simultaneously. So as I was working through my nonprofit leadership journey,
Uh-huh.
I was also working through my journey as an
Uh-huh.
artist. And so I think maybe another technical piece I want folks to hold on to is like, you don't have to choose. You can be both of those, and you really should be both of those, because whatever that creative self is will inform every step that you make.
Mm-hmm.
And so really thinking about them as parallel paths. So I think about like I as I said, start in a role that's very community facing, very close to community.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think establish a vision for where you want to be in a certain amount of time. So if you want to be on the fundraising, resource development side of things, thinking about, what skills you bring and what seat you can sit in to be able to attain the skills you need to get wherever you're trying to go. So if my vision, which I told you it wasn't, but if my vision had been to become an executive director, I would say starting a program role, take an associate development role, perhaps move into some type of management role in fundraising, And then think about, now that you have that foundation established, think about what is your vision for how you might impact or shift the narrative in the world of fundraising, because it needs to shift tremendously.
Ain't that the
And then
truth?
think about what seat, right? Like I could talk about that all day. I know we ain't got time for that conversation, so I'm gonna keep the lid on that. You let me know what you want to talk about because I got
Like,
plenty to
tell me,
say.
let me let you know I could too, because I've been in the nonprofit world, and we've been doing the same old process, even with fundraising. But
Mm.
the same old process, same old
Mm-hmm.
people, same old like
Mm-hmm.
networks, and
Yes.
the we have not innovated since the beginning of time, and we've had all this
No.
innovate. I digress. But I guess we could talk about that. Let me let you go back into your thing. Let me not hijack it and
No,
go
you're
down this
fine.
rabbit
No,
hole.
you're okay. You're okay because I will follow you directly into it. So we're gonna put that on the shelf for the time being. I will follow you directly into it. And then so I think the point I was making was think about what how you want to change the narrative and choose and set your sights on a position or a seat that's going to allow you to change the narrative. Now, let me say this because this relates to something you asked me earlier.
Hmm.
While I didn't have a vision to become an executive director, it became very clear to me that that is a seat of power. And as a Black woman wanting to change the narrative,
Hmm.
once I got into the seat, I realized that. And then it was about, okay, so how do I start shifting things, conversations, processes in this seat
Hmm.
to be able to change this conversation? One thing I did have to face, and part of why I have now stepped outside of the sector, is that, and something that very much informs Culture Kinesis's work is you can get to a seat, but at the end of the day, if the mindsets of the folks around you who are also decision makers, who are also gatekeepers, who are also folks who move this forward, is not evolved and there's no interest in it evolving, your individual power may not be enough
Hmm.
to change the narrative,
Yeah.
right? That's a hard pill to swallow.
Hmm.
And in some spaces, it will be enough, but in some spaces, it is not possible to shift it where you want it to be. And so you then have to think about, well, where, what power do I have? And what home does that power need so that I can move things forward and so I can realize this vision of the work I do in the world? And for me, it came down to I can't keep fighting with organizations to do the work that I need to do in the world.
Hmm.
My work is about empowering folks. It's about getting folks to have a different conversation. It's about getting folks to really embrace racial equity work as a undercurrent of everything. In order to do that work, I have to step out of this sector,
Mm. Mm.
and I'm going to have to put pressure from the outside.
Yeah. Um. You gave me a lot to sit with right there, because I just recently finished a fellowship with Rockwood last year. It was called Building
Mm-hmm.
Power,
Yeah.
and it had me sitting with power in a new perspective.
Ooh.
Like, what is power? How do I hold power? Where do I yield power? How do I share
Mm.
power?
Yes.
And how do I give away my power?
Mm.
Which is a big one, right? Um,
Yes, whatever. Yes.
and it had me sitting with, like, not only myself but just us as a people, like how we give so much power to institutions that
Yes.
don't have our best interest
No.
and don't do anything for us. And why do we
This
give
is
away
true.
so much power?
Mm.
And then it also had me sitting in reflection of, as I'm raising a black queen myself, um,
Mm.
how do I don't want to say empower, because black women are just phenomenal, and you hold power just by just being a phenomenal woman
Mm.
that you are.
I love that.
But how do I get out of your way, and how do I be of assistance, right?
Mm. I love that. I love that so much. I mean, what a question. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah,
I know you have
so
more.
it's been having me sit, and then it had me coming back from that whole fellowship, talking to all
Mhm.
the black women, that whole seats and power. Like, let's, hey sis, I realized I might have been ignorant in the past, and
Mm.
how can I support you? You
I
let me
love it.
know. How can I
I love
support
it.
you? Right?
Mm. Mm. I love that. Mm.
And then whatever I could do, I'm gonna do my best to get it done, and hold me accountable at the
Mm.
same time. And so,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, you know,
Which takes a lot. I mean, that takes a level of humility that everyone is not going to have in their leadership.
hmm it does. Takes a lot of humility, self reflection, and
Hmm.
just realizing that, hey, I don't have all the answers, and being okay with that, and knowing
Yeah.
that's leadership too.
Is it ever? I think it's actually it's a foundational part of leadership, right? I don't think I became an excellent leader until I realized you need your team,
hmm
right? Nobody does this on their own. And quite honestly, you don't need to be the star every time.
hmm Yeah.
We know you're gonna come through with an amazing outfit. That's what you do. Your nails gonna be done, your hair gonna be on point, right? You deserve to be in the front. But you don't need to be in the front all the time.
Yeah.
Like there's, and I think, you asked the question previously about, advice to give folks and what's something that I've learned that I want people to hear and hold to. One of my mentors who now is family, as I said before, like one of the most powerful things she ever told me, and she was also the first person that was like, you don't get to stay here. Let's move. Let's get it.
hmm
You gotta go. Um, she told me like and this was when I was a teaching fellow, she said, you have to always be a teacher and a learner. If you stop learning, there is no hope for your leadership. You have to always be learning. And I learned, from that, I held that in my mind, but I learned from that too. The people around you who are on your team, who report to you, who are community folks, who are peers, they all have things to teach you. And if you're so arrogant to believe that you have nothing to gain from other people, you will never, ever actually reach the pinnacle of your leadership.
Mm.
You won't. It's not possible.
Yeah, that's big old facts right there. I'm gonna ask you this question. You can take it wherever you want to go. What's one
Yeah.
good lesson life has taught you?
Everything is relevant.
Mm.
And I think I just learned that recently. I spent a lot of time feeling like I wasted time in my life. I told you I didn't want to be an executive director. I was mad at God, like, why you put me here twice? I don't want to be here. I don't like this. But when I tell you, sir, it could not be clearer to me today why I was in those seats. It could not be clearer to me. The frustrations taught me things, the triumphs taught me things, the people that I encountered taught me things, and are people who hold me up to this day. They kept me honest, they kept me accountable to community. Everything is relevant. And quite honestly, I think the things that probably feel the most irrelevant are perhaps the most relevant
Yeah.
because we have a vision for who we think we will become.
Mm-hmm.
And to come full circle, right? So you talking about limiting beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
If we were to decide who we became, this world would be so much less, there would be so much less beauty and fantastic things happening in this world because we can't envision a lot of times that which we could be or how we could have
Mm-hmm.
impact. It's our own type of individual cultural reimagination, right? Like we have to be able to do the work to see something beyond ourselves, but life will take us to some interesting places, and we still have to trust and believe that that space has something to teach us that will be more than relevant
Mm-hmm.
later on.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. One thing I love about the show is that I get to, speak to amazing people like yourself. And they're in all sorts of spaces, but at least I would say probably 50% are entrepreneurs in some shape,
Hmm.
form, or fashion, maybe even more than that. And one thing I've learned through my career of entrepreneurship is that, some data that came out, I think it was like last year or the year before, that Black women are
Hmm.
the next, like, highest group of individuals that hold more degrees and are
Mm,
stepping out into entrepreneurship um,
mm-hmm,
in the U.S. and earning degrees and doing entrepreneurship at a higher rate than any other culture, race, or group
mm-hmm.
out there. And
I love it.
yeah, shout it out to the black women, and they're doing it with
I love
with
to see it.
they're doing it without VC money. They're doing it without like
Listen,
everything that comes with it.
we in the trenches.
Yeah, they getting it straight from the mud, and I mean you're a
Yes.
new embodiment of that. Um, why do you think that is? Just out of curiosity, like from your own experience and your journey, like what is it that you think is causing this new trend or this new wave?
Hmm. Yeah, that's such a powerful question, and I want to sit with it for a second. So I give an answer that meets it there, that powerful place. I think that I have two answers. I think that Black women are inherently divine.
Mm,
And so I think at some point in our lives, we arrive at a place where we recognize I have to do my work. Like I have to do the work that is going to allow me to fulfill the legacy that I've been given and been
mm,
asked to hold. Um, for me, it is so much about legacy. It's what I talk with all of my clients about. It's actually the first conversation we have every time. What legacy are you trying to leave in this world?
mm,
And I think that, when I think about the Black women who works, who are my friends, who are my sisters, they all are so clear, or they're getting to that place of clarity about what legacy they want to leave. And I think at some point in your journey, once you become very clear about legacy,
mm-hmm,
you also become very clear that institutions cannot hold that.
mm,
I searched high and low in my career for a home for my vision.
mm-hmm,
And the point at which I realized there is no home for it, you have to build it, right? James Baldwin has a quotation. He's my favorite of all
yeah.
time. He has a quote where he says, like, the space that I will occupy will not exist until I make it.
Ooh,
I'm not going to fit anywhere else.
ooh,
And it just sends chills up my spine every time I read it and every time I think about it because it just made sense to me like a year ago, like 6 months ago, maybe, where it was like, no, you've been given a divine legacy, and these institutions ain't gonna hold it for you.
mm,
So you have to build it.
mm,
You have to.
mm,
And not only is it for you to like realize that legacy, there are other people who need you to build this lane so that they can do their work around legacy too. So I think Black women are inherently about community. And so we're always acting I think, in connection with this is bigger than me.
mm,
And if it's bigger than me, this institution probably ain't gonna hold it
mm,
in the way that it needs. It's not gonna nourish
mm,
it. So I gotta get out of here. Bye.
mm,
And sometimes it's hard, right? It was super hard for me to leave nonprofit. I dealt with a lot of heartbreak around like I thought this would be the site of my revolution. I did.
mm,
I believed that it could be. And the point at which it became clear it couldn't be, I was heartbroken, but I accepted it. And I got busy getting ready to move.
man, man, I love everything about that answer. Um, and I feel like, especially in America, like the black women have been, making space since the beginning of time when they was taking care of white babies and holding down the households
Say it. Who say it?
to
Mm,
to you know uh, standing beside their man, from MLK being on the back end holding it down,
yeah.
to if we even go to recently, when the world needed words to hear, young Amanda Gorman coming out there
Oh,
and, and,
did she ever?
and giving us the words we needed that we didn't even know we
Just
needed.
as calm, man.
To-
But just as calm too, right? Like a Black woman standing in her complete power, like doing the work she has been asked to do.
mm,
So clear to me.
And I was like, in all this beauty and all this power and everything, y'all still gonna disrespect these queens?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They will. Because they don't like it. They don't want to see it. And also I think, it is easy to say, well, they don't want to see it. They don't. They're not for us, and true to some degree. But also, I think that that's where the divinity comes in. They don't get it. Black women are also inherently creative.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the language everybody speaks. So sometimes we out here saying things that people do not understand, and instead of truly. Instead of them saying, like, that's fascinating, but I don't get it, tell me more, I think it scares people. They're like, well, I don't get it, and that makes me feel a type of way, so I can't hear it.
Right.
Mm,
And then
right.
I follow up to that by saying that sometimes when you telling your vision to a small minded person or somebody who can't see it, it's
Mm,
because that vision
uh-oh.
wasn't meant for them, right? They ain't meant to see it, so
Uh-oh.
it was
Right?
given to you
Truly.
for you to create.
Yes. a hundred
Which is why
percent.
you had
I
to leave
love
that
that.
corporation, which is why you had to go do your thing, because it
Yep.
it wasn't meant for everybody to see, so you got created for other people to see it.
Yes. 100%.
uh
100%.
um Man, I got so far off the tangent, I forgot where I was going with my.
No. But like you said, we just having a conversation. I'm enjoying this tremendously. So
uh,
these are my exact favorite types of
yeah,
conversation.
mine too, mine too. I knew he was gonna have one. I just, when you go get so deep in the conversation, like, and then you look at the time, it's like, dang, there's so much I want to talk
Time
about,
always
but
messing
like,
us up. I
we can't
know.
be up here
I
for two
know.
hours talking.
Well, listen, you let me know when I need to come back, and I'll be back because I got a lot to say. So you let
Oh
me know.
man. All right. So let's. What do you think the future has in store when you look at what in the nonprofit sector, entrepreneurship? Let's go in that
Hmm.
realm. What does the
Yeah.
future have in store, especially for what you see in store for young Black women or just our people in
Hmm.
general in these different fields that you've been a part of and been
Yeah.
blessed to still co-contribute to.
Hmm. Yeah. I think here's what I envision, and this is why I am working to make space for this, and actually not make space for this. I consider this in a lot of ways the foundation of my work at Culture Kinesis.
Mm-hmm,
Um, I work with everybody. I work with white folks. I work with black folks. I work with everyone.
mm-hmm,
Anyone who wants to do the work of culture reimagination,
mm-hmm,
I can be there with them.
mm-hmm,
What I know to be true is that for black women in particular, black people, but black women in particular, I think as this work happens more, where people are being asked to adopt different practices around how workplace happens, right? How work gets done
mm-hmm,
within institutions. As positive shift starts to occur, there will be lanes open that we need to be ready to take.
mm-hmm,
And a big part of my work at Culture Kinesis is working with Black women in particular to understand how do you lead from a very authentic place,
mm-hmm,
and how do you either discover for the first time or rediscover that authentic self that is going to be needed to do this leadership work for the next era.
mm-hmm,
And so the answer to your question is my most optimistic self believes that as people start to wake up and unlearn and relearn,
mm-hmm,
there will be space that is made inevitably.
mm-hmm,
Not everywhere, and it's going to take a while,
mm-hmm.
but it will happen. My vision is that as that space is made, we as Black women understand how powerful we are, and we step right into those spaces and start to change the entire trajectory of how we do things.
Love that. Uh, Now I gotta ask, how'd you come up with the name Culture Kinesis?
That's also a funny story. So, there's two answers. I'm gonna tell you about like logistically how it happened, and
Uh,
then what it means and what it symbolizes. So, you know how when you get an idea
Uh-huh.
and it's the first one and you're trying to come up with something, you never trust the first one. You're
Yeah.
like, can't be the first one. That would be too easy. Like that's not how that happens. I was having a conversation with a friend and, telling her like I'm really having a hard time coming up with this name. It's really trying me. And we talked it through and she was like, Rachel, I really feel like kinesis is like what you're describing to me as a type of kinesis, a type of kinetic energy where you're saying change only happens if we all move. Everybody has to move from one place to the other. People have to move away from power hoarding and into a place of power sharing. People have to move away from avoiding power and assuming and shift into assuming power, right? But power has to shift, and in order for that to happen, folks have to move from one place to the
Mm-hmm.
other. That's kinetic energy, right? That always has to be in play.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot just move in our minds. The mind move is important, but we also have to shift other things, power, position, etc. So it really comes from this place of needing folks to understand if anything moves,
Mm-hmm.
culture has to move. Anything you envision moving, culture is at the seat of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the very first thing you have to do is be able to move your culture from one place to the other.
Mm. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's beautiful.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And also evidence that like, your community will help you out. They will help you make sense of things when you're not able to see it in a way that you want to see it. So that's the first piece of it. The second piece is when I think about culture kinesis, the vision that I get in my mind is always of a dandelion, not the yellow ones, but the ones that you blow
Yeah,
that have like the
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 little
white
white
seeds
ones
on
and
them.
it's
Those are my favorite,
yeah.
right? People get really mad when they take walks with me because I have to pick it. I have to blow it. Like it's not an option. If I pass one, it's like a compulsion. I have to do it, and I've always been like that. Um, but for me, like why that image is so powerful is because there is a central stem coming out of the ground,
Mm-hmm.
but it only really takes a slight disturbance for those seeds to dislodge and start flying around. It can just be a soft breeze.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens, everyone has a different path. The seeds are not going all in one direction,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're not all going, they don't have the same path. Every single seed has a unique path, and then it lands somewhere, and it has a responsibility
Mm-hmm.
to take the wisdom from the journey that it went on and plant a new or plant itself somewhere else and then build something there in that new understanding. Um, I think that mirrors a journey that we have to be on. We're not going to all follow the same path. The idea that you can take a group of people and move them mindset wise from one place to the other and everybody ends up in the same place is not realistic to me.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody will end up in different places. What I want is to empower people to understand that this journey you've been on is powerful and you now have a responsibility
Mm-hmm.
to exist as what is understood to be a weed, right? Because dandelions are, but to really push a counterculture of positivity in this new space that you're in, of shift in this new space that you're in.
Love that. Love that. Love that. Um, let's end it off like this because that was a beautiful. And um, when you were going through the the first part of that, the explanation, it reminded me of early in the conversation. It was like because he was telling me like, oh, you did that was too easy. I didn't want to accept it. I was like. Didn't he already tell you like you worry about doing your job? Here you go again.
Ooh, but you see the relationship that I have with God. He's like, I don't have time for this, but I'm gonna tell you one more time, stay in your lane.
let me let me let me explain it to you then.
And this is how he loves us because he tells me every time, but he's like, I got other children, so I'm gonna tell you quick, mind your business, okay? I'm learning.
So tell me what projects are you currently working on and where can people find you?
Yes, thank you for the invitation to share that. So you can visit my website, www.culturekinesis.com. Let me say it again, www.culturekinesis.com. A lot of people say cultural kinesis, and it gets in my ear, and I have to correct them, and then I mess it up myself. Um, that always happens. You can find me on Instagram, Culture Kinesis as well. And then as far as projects that I'm working on, so I have two key things that are coming up in this part of
Mhm.
2022. So I hold a monthly space. It's called Call and Response with Culture
Mhm.
Kinesis. It's a drop-in space. It's a free space. It's a virtual community where really we're there as Black women, as women of color, to work together to remove the residue of white supremacy culture and toxic capitalism and all their partners, as I like to say.
Mhm.
Um, and witness, what hurts,
Mhm.
what has been challenging, or the ways in which we've been suppressed. But then move toward how do we elevate through this and how do we make plans to step into our power in the future. So that monthly space will exist all through 2022. We launch on January 27th. But again, it's a drop in space.
Mhm.
So anyone who feels like they can benefit from a space like that, sign up for my newsletter,
Mhm.
and I'll make sure you get that information month by month. Um, and then the second thing that I'd like you all to know about is that I'm hosting or I'm going to launch a cohort for Black executive directors who are emerging, who are very new in their roles. And that will be starting in July 2022. And the vision behind that is being an executive director is lonely enough. Being a Black
Yes.
executive director is a particular experience. Ooh, it's a particular experience, and there's a lot that I learned in that space. But one of the key things I learned is how much you need community
Mhm.
to be able to get to a place where you feel like you're successful in that place, and also need community to help you remember you get to be your authentic
Mm.
self and still be successful in this space. But that world is not going to tell you. And so I would love to create a community, or there will be a community that exists starting in July where folks can participate in a space where they don't have to be alone on that journey of being a new Black executive director.
Rachel, are you telling me I don't have to be alone and I could be
You
my
don't.
whole black self?
Your whole black self. Listen. Your whole black self. And a lot of folks won't tell you that's the case, but I'm here to tell you that it is. And I want people, I mean, it's critical for people to recognize that you can be.
Like, and I think the space you're creating, I thank you so much for creating it because I think that's definitely
Thank
what we
you.
need ever since George. I mean, we need it way before George Floyd, but George
Hmm.
Floyd on
Yeah.
down made it even more apparent
Hmm. Hmm.
with some of the things that
Yes.
I know Black executives have been navigating from this time on
Hmm.
since the
Yes.
pandemic. So thank you for creating that space
Hmm.
for us, and I
Thank you.
can't wait to I look for all of you, everybody who's listening. I'm gonna get all this information from her. I'm gonna put it in the show notes. I'm gonna put it on our website. I'm gonna promote it, whatever she needs me to do.
Thank you, my friend.
And we're definitely big supporters of everything that you do here at Rise Urban Nation. Any
Thank
more
you.
last words for the people
Thank
before we
you.
head out?
Just gratitude to you for this space. I mean, it is so powerful and beautiful to be able to come in and just be in conversation about things that matter and to be able to dream a little bit.
Yeah.
So just gratitude to the folks listening. Gratitude for community. Thank you for holding this space.
Thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen,
Yes.
Rachel Wyley. Make sure you hit the like button when this episode drops. Share with a friend. Share with a friend. Share with a cousin. Share with a nephew. Share with a Black executive. Whoever you got, share it, share it, like, and love. Leave a comment. Look forward to seeing you guys all at the next episode.